Welcome to the Humanities and Science Award, everyone. Really appreciate that you all made it through the rain to join us this evening on this very special occasion. We're here to celebrate humanity and science. We wanted to provide something new for the analytical community. We had a conversation with Phenomenex in the summer of 2014, and we decided that we needed to shine a much bigger spotlight on the great work that's done within the field. We're delighted to welcome all of you and the winners and one of the runners-up to this gala dinner. But you've not come here to hear me talk, no doubt. So I'm going to pass you very swiftly on to Alex Garagoslo, who's going to make a presentation of the Humanity and Science Award. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural Humanities and Science Award. We're very delighted to have you here on behalf of Phenomenex. And I am delighted and privileged to be here this evening as I am trying to fill in for our founder and CEO, Mr. Fasha Major, who couldn't unfortunately be here this evening. But I think we can all forgive him for not being here today because he's actually not away on business, but he's actually on a mission on behalf of the Outward Bound Trust in the UK. For those of you that know, Outward Bound Trust is a charity that supports disadvantaged children in Britain and in many parts of the world. And in fact, Fasha had to be there for a board meeting and some events that they were organizing for the youth in the UK. So he sends his apologies for not being here today. And I also will try to take as minimum time as possible and pass you on to our winners this evening. So again, thank you and welcome. For those of you that may not know, Phenomenex was established about 33 years ago from a garage, in a garage. And today we have companies in 18 countries around the world and partners in 60 other countries. We have 3 R&D and manufacturing sites in the US, and we are involved in the full commercialization process from the R&D to manufacturing and distribution of leading-edge science separations products, particularly in chromatography. I think that what really makes us unique, however, is not just the work that we do with leading scientists such as yourself who are here this evening, but also the work that we do in the area of supporting philanthropy. It's really embedded in the DNA of Phenomenex, and as somebody who's been with the company for 21 years almost, I can intensely testify that we are involved in many causes around the world, and many organizations write checks, and we certainly do that. But I think what really separates us, makes us different, is the fact that we like to really roll up our sleeves and get involved in causes all around the world. So from rescue missions that happen from all over the world, we like to send our employees. In fact, New Orleans several years ago, you all know about the crisis that happened here, and we send our employees on a volunteer basis. They come to address issues like that, from building schools in Belize to sponsoring blood drives for the American Red Cross, from serving 360,000 meals plus with the Feed My Starving Children Foundation. These are meals that we pack in our facilities where employees and family members get together to prepare these packages to be sent around the world through the Cheers Foundation Orphanage in India. So there's really not a week at Phenomenex where you don't hear of a philanthropic initiative that we're supporting. And if I may say so, in that regard, I think we're extremely unique in the analytical science industry. And with that said, when the analytical scientists approached us, we just jumped at it. We thought it was absolutely brilliant to see somebody in our space to have the foresight to want to take on this initiative. And for this inaugural event, we are very, very delighted by the level of number of applicants. Rich, how many applicants? Over 85. And really, we're hoping that this inaugural event will continue to lead on to more events. And with that said, the fantastic thing about it is that all of this innovation that, for those of you who are in the room who are involved in that process, is that the primary and lasting motive should be for impacting humankind, for making a difference. And I think that our winners this evening absolutely exemplify that. For those of you that were able to attend their presentations today, and they'll hopefully will address quite a good component of it. I know everybody wants to have a, but I hope they will get into actually describing their work, because it's absolutely phenomenal. And so the prize for this award is a check for $25,000 to the winners, and they are invited to come out to our headquarters for an all-expense-paid trip. And I hope that for those of you who are in the room, you will continue to promote this to deserving applicants for next year. And with that said, I'm delighted and honored to present the 2015 Humanity and Science Award to Professor Peter Seeberger and Professor Andreas Seidel-Morgenstern. Promises not to go through the airport.
I'd like to thank, of course, the analytical scientists, and we'd like to thank Phenomenex for selecting us to receive this award. It really does mean a lot to us. And it may just be fair enough to let you in on our project, but we have been pushing forward the last 4 years, because we have come a long way, but we have not come all the way. And we may need the input or the help from some of you in the future. What we have tried to do is very simply, we have tried to create important life-saving anti-malarial drugs from waste. From plant waste, and we use light and we use oxygen to make that. And that's not a joke, that's the actual fact. But before we go there, let me just maybe transpond us not from this nice room here to a somewhat less pleasant room, which we took a picture of in West Africa, and that would be an ideal situation, a woman for a child under a bed net, the cheapest form of protection against malaria. But even if they use that protection of insecticide-treated bed nets, that child may contract a disease such as malaria. It may have a fever, and it may force the father of that child to maybe go to the local market to obtain anti-malarial drugs. Now, the unfortunate thing will be that if that happens in West Africa, the chance that his father buys a medication that's a pure fake and by no means active is about 40%, because 40% of anti-malarial drugs in West Africa are fake. And that's bad, because if you give that child a drug, in the best case, nothing happens. In the worst case, it'll actually be not just ineffective, but it will be a toxic drug. If that same thing happens in Southeast Asia, the chance is 53% the drug is fake. And I think that's terrible, because it kills many, many children. And the number of children that die based on WHO estimation, 660,000 people per year. 90% of those are children under the age of 5 years old. I think any one of them is one too many. Now we should be aware of the fact that malaria can be treated, and it's just a matter of poverty. The expenditure in Liberia is 50 cents US per person and year for healthcare. 50 cents per person and year. That's something we should remember when we talk about Ebola and other things. So if we change and fight poverty, we fight also disease. But luckily, there are these bushes here. That's Artemisia annua, or sweet wormwood in English, or Quindao in Chinese. That's been around for a long time. It's been used in traditional Chinese medicine for over 2,000 years. And it may be the only good outcome of the Vietnam War that a molecule was identified that's contained at about 1% in the leaves of Artemisia annua, and that's called artemisinin. During the Vietnam War, the Chinese and the North Vietnamese lost more soldiers to malaria than they did to South Vietnamese or American bullets. And so it was a program of about 500 scientists in China in the early 70s that discovered this molecule, and for that work, Tu Youyou, the lead scientist, received one of the biggest awards after the Nobel Prize, the Lasker Award in 2011. In 2001, the WHO decided that artemisinin-based drugs should be a first line of defense against malaria. And 2 years ago, we used 330 million doses of artemisinin-based drugs. That's about 200 tons of drug. The problem is right now it's about 5 to 10 times too expensive for most of those people in need. And if we could bring the price down, the need would be about 1 billion doses per year. So we have, if we do that, we'll need more of this drug. The drug today is sold by Sanofi. In this case, it's an ester. As an ether, it's sold by Novartis. And if you go to Africa or Southeast Asia, you can buy it. It'll cost you about 30 bucks, and you'll be protected. It'll be no problem. So I said 50 cents per person and year. In sub-Saharan Africa, it's a major problem. And the problem is that although we can grow the plant, the price of the content of the artemisinin changes. In 2003, it was about $250 per kilo. And as people realized that it's so good in protecting lives, a lot of people want the drug, and the cost and the price for the drug went up to about $1,200 per kilo. So a lot of farmers rushed in, and the supply all of a sudden grew, and the price dropped, and the farmers went out, the price increased, and that sort of goes on and on. There's never enough at a good price. And so in addition to extracting this from plants and converting it into the desired drugs, the Gates Foundation spent $53 million to help Jay Kiesling and Sanofi to use genetically modified yeast to make artemisinin out of this genetically modified yeast. The problem is that that process is expensive. It costs about $450 US per kilo to make artemisinin, so it really doesn't help us anything. And I tell you all this because I knew none of this when we started this project. We worked on something totally esoteric and unrelated because I work as a director at Max-Planck, and I'm a pure fundamental scientist. What we try to make is we try to make singlet oxygen. And singlet oxygen is the stuff you breathe, except for the fact that one of the electrons gets turned around. And I try to find ways to turn the electrons around more efficiently. So to you, it's completely boring. But it turns out, that turning around electrons helps us to create the oxygen we need to put in this oxygen bridge in artemisinin. And we found a way to do that very efficiently, not just to make artemisinin from waste. And the waste that's thrown away today in China and Vietnam contains about the same amount of the starting material we use than the drug that's been extracted. So we can use that waste and we can convert it in 70% to make artemisinin. And we think we could also then go on to make the drugs directly. And we did this by using a reactor that's about this size. It uses oxygen, it uses waste, it uses light that comes from an LED, and within 5 minutes, with 70% conversion, we can make artemisinin. And that was unexpected for us. It took one postdoc 6 months and it cost less than $100,000 to do that. There was one small little thing to do, and that was to convert artemisinin over to the drugs. And for that you need sodium borohydride. And sodium borohydride in Vietnam, people with buckets and shovels and rubber boots come and they shovel in the buckets and it makes pop every now and then. In Germany, when it makes pop, that's a problem. So that's why sodium borohydride is not allowed in batch processes. And for that reason, we developed a continuous flow process using packed columns, which are not so dissimilar when you have Phenomenex columns used for separations. And using that, we put a 3-step process together that in the first step, it's a photochemical process. An IR is used to monitor what comes out, and if something goes wrong, we can stop all that. It reduces in the second step, again we monitor. In the third step, we put an ether or an ester in place, and in a single shot, we can go from waste and light and oxygen to a drug. The problem was we did not only get drug, but sometimes we also get impurities, and that's when we had to go to the experts, the chemical engineers, and my colleague, Andreas Seidel-Morgenstern, he's going to tell you what he did.
Yeah, so this is the process Peter and his group developed, but of course every reactor gives out something besides the target product. In his case there was a photocatalyst, he did not mention this, unconverted feedstock, and some side products. And I'm, as a chemical engineer, have been always interested in splitting several complicated mixtures, and I want to give you a small introduction in a very powerful chromatography process, which some of you might know, maybe not all. It's more engineering view. Chemical engineers like continuous processes where you, without any interruption, introduce the feed that you want to process and you harvest the products. Chromatography is a process which typically works batch-wise because you use the storage of your material. It's used at a certain moment and you have to regenerate. On the left-hand side you see a countercurrent process, which is a hypothetical one because we cannot transport the solid phases in a countercurrent fashion. And on the right-hand side you see a multi-column process which we developed for that project to have a powerful separation. The idea is to change periodically the position of feed in a sequence of several columns, but you don't interrupt the feed all the time. You can send in such a separation unit the feed. We call it a simulated moving bed technology. How you see it here in the classical way, as UOP already in the early 60s used it for other separations in the petrochemistry, we cannot split into 3 fractions. So we used in our project a more complicated configuration that I explained in the afternoon in more detail, where we are able to split a feed into 3 outlet streams. The idea is to capture one of the fractions, the strongest bound component in our mixture was captured, and then every column was taken out of the elution train and cleaned and regenerated and then placed back. And in this way we could also, without any interruption, do the separation needed for that project. So the final outcome of the first step of separation, where we isolated the artemisinin, so the precursor of the final drug, is illustrated here in 3 chromatograms. On the top you see the chromatogram belonging to the feed mixture, by the way measured with a Phenomenex column, I should say that here. In the middle you see the outlet of our chromatography stream. So artemisinin is not yet fully purified. We could improve that process, but that was not needed in this area because the background of our group is also crystallization. So the last chromatogram of the button, at the bottom where you see the finally purified target product, artemisinin, was done after a very simple crystallization step. So that was the first collaboration with Peter in that area, but in the meantime they moved on and made the final drug in this other reaction steps, and we got the feed from them. So you saw the slide a few minutes ago. So on the right hand side there is more in the mixture now because the line starts very early, photocatalyst is inside, but now the artesunate, for example, the final active drug is there. And we developed a separation module S2, which I cannot explain you now in detail, because you are hungry and you would like to dinner. I just show you again a schematic slide, hard to see from the back, where we have now 3 steps for the separation. First is a filtration and precipitation step, where we eliminate polar side products. Then a chromatographic unit with 5 columns, which in a certain stage eliminates the target, the artesunate, and again a final crystallization step. And all these could be nicely connected. We have to say the feed was transported from Berlin, which is not so far from my city, from Magdeburg, so we did not connect them directly, but that was just for logistic reasons. In a certain way we can say that the whole process can run fully continuously. So that's my small part. I want to summarize the chemistry on the top, the final chromatogram of the artesunate, and I would like to thank my group in Magdeburg. A few names, I will not tell them here. The group of Peter Seeberger. We should say that the Max-Planck Society, so the German taxpayers paid our project. A few people from Knauer are sitting here. We used your equipment. Thanks a lot for that. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank also Georges Guillochon, because the chromatography that we did is nonlinear chromatography, overloaded chromatography, and we owe him a lot of insight, which I explained in the afternoon a little bit more. And finally, I pushed the button to thank Phenomenex, the analytical scientists, and also the jury behind this selection process. But Peter has the final summary.
So after all this work was done, the science is done, the question is what's going to happen next. The situation as it presented itself until about 2 years ago was, as I said, traditional extraction, and then supplemented by 30 tons per year out of a Sanofi amyris process made of materials. But it was not enough. And so we then faced the challenge of how we're going to translate that. And we did this by suggesting that we could not just use the waste from the farmers and then make them more productive. We could also in principle use materials made by genetically modified yeast. And we implemented this by creating a startup venture, Artemiflow, that was started as a social venture. And I can tell you, I've started about 5 companies to now, and in all of them we've made money. This was one we didn't want to make any money. And people didn't take us serious because they understood a way of making money. And so that's when we converted and say, now we're going to make money. The way we're going to make money is by using Artemisinin for cancer. And it turns out that you can actually treat cancer with these compounds very efficiently. Collaborators of ours have treated women in Africa for very, very dangerous carcinoma at extremely interesting rates at $20 per person. So that's a way to make money in some of these countries. But at the same time, we have now, of course, continued to try to drive for Africa and Southeast Asia for these malaria drugs. And I can now say that last week we have come across to a contract with the Vietnamese government to set up a first pilot plant and afterwards a plant to produce anti-malarial drugs together with Vietnam, enabling small farmers to make more money and by cutting out middlemen, but today sell most of these drugs across state lines over to India, from India to Switzerland and Germany. And by doing that, we feel we can bring the price down by a factor of approximately 5, and that would go a long way to producing much, much cheaper drugs. The science in this case, I hate to say, was almost the easier part, and the implementation of that was difficult. I say this also because if people are in the room who would like to contribute in either money or otherwise in kind, or with giving us advice, it would be most welcome, because I can say over the years we've had people helping us with advice in other ways, and it's been extremely helpful to us. If there are people who have insights about regulatory affairs and other things, we're more than happy to talk to you. With that, I would like to thank the people who actually made all this happen. It was all started by François Levesque, a Canadian postdoc in my lab, Daniel Kopetsky, a German postdoc, who implemented LED reactors, and Carrie Gilmore, an American postdoc and now assistant professor with us in the department. We'd like to thank the Max-Planck Society and these companies for supporting us, of course. Most importantly, for this evening's event, we'd like to thank the jury for selecting our project, and none of those other projects are probably just as worthy as ours, so we got lucky in this case. We'd like to thank Phenomenex, the analytical scientists, for supporting humanitarian causes. That's not too many of those awards, and so thank you very much. We really appreciate that, and thank you immensely. If you're interested and like to contact us, there are ways to get in touch with us. And with that, again, thank you very much, and hopefully have a nice dinner.